Welcome everyone. Welcome everyone. Welcome everyone to another Ref Brandon and the Todd family YouTube video. Wherever you are, whatever you may be doing, thank you so much for making Ref Brandon and the Todd family part of your day. We always greatly appreciate it. Tonight, as you can tell by the title, my main topic is going to be why did people expect different results or differently, ever how you want to word the question, because I've talked about it for a while now here on the channel. We'll get to that in a few short minutes, but first, for all of you that come on here live, feel free to leave a comment in the comment section down below. Make sure you like the video, give the video a thumbs up. If you have not yet subscribed, please do so. And as soon as I'm done, share the video on all social media platforms. But before I talk about why did people expect different results, or why did folks expect differently, ever how you want to say it, I'd love to have your comments and feedback on this subject. But first, I want to talk about what we're going to see on Christmas Day. It used to just be in the NBA, but now it's also in the NFL. And it'll be the same four teams in the NFL that played on Saturday. That way, instead of playing from Sunday to Wednesday, only on 3 days rest, this way you're still on 4 days rest. So it'd be the same as playing on a Sunday and then playing on that Thursday night game the next week. But in the NBA on Wednesday, of course, the New York Knicks will play. The Knicks on Christmas Day are just like the Cowboys and Lions on Thanksgiving. In the NFL, the Knicks play every year. It's because they're in New York City. It's the largest market in the world. So the NBA feels like that's their chance to get the most views by playing the New York Knicks at noon on Christmas Day. This year, the Knicks will be playing the San Antonio Spurs Christmas Day at noon. Hey there, Josh. Right now, I'm talking the NBA, and then I'm going to talk some NFL, and then my main topic is going to be college football. My question is, why did they expect different results? And we'll talk about that as soon as I get through with the NBA and the NFL. So noon, we have the San Antonio Spurs and the New York Knicks. 2:30, we have the Minnesota Timberwolves and the Dallas Mavericks. Hey there, Aku. Glad to have you here. 5 o'clock is a game that on paper should be a good game. And if I'd have seen this game back in the preseason, I'd have thought, well, that's a good game on Christmas Day. And then for whatever reason, the Philadelphia 76ers have not been near as good as expected this year. Maybe on Christmas Day they'll decide to wake up. But 5 o'clock Eastern time on Christmas Day, we have the Philadelphia 76ers and the Boston Celtics. Hey there, Pumpkin Rabbit. Glad to have you here. 8 o'clock Christmas night, we had the Los Angeles Lakers and the Golden State Warriors. And then the final NBA game on Christmas, 10:30 Eastern time, the West Coast game will be the Denver Nuggets and the Phoenix Suns. Now, hopefully, at least a couple of these games end up being good, and most of these superstars, instead of sitting out, will decide to play. But since the NFL now plays on Christmas, I expect the NBA to have low ratings across the board. They're already low because their ratings are dropping, but now they're going to be even lower because the NFL is on. But the two NFL games on Christmas Day, 1 o'clock Eastern time, we have the Kansas City Chiefs and the Pittsburgh Steelers. And then at 4:30 Eastern time, we have the Baltimore Ravens and the Houston Texans. And the Ravens just beat the Steelers this past Saturday. So now with 2 games to go, both of those teams have 10 wins and 5 losses. So they are tied at the top of their division with the same exact record, and they played twice in the regular season. The Ravens won once, and the Steelers won once. My predictions, Josh, somehow, some way, the Chiefs will do what they always do, and they'll play an ugly one-score game, and they'll find a way to win it So I'll pick the Chiefs. And then in the 4:30 game, I would love to see the Texans win. But for some reason, the Texans are missing something this year. I've talked about it a couple times. I'm not sure what it is, but you just watch them play, and they're just not playing as good as they played last year. Now, they still are going to win that division easily because that division is terrible. Colts are the only decent team in the division because the Jaguars and Titans are absolutely awful. But since the Texans aren't as good as they were last year, I'll pick the Ravens. So I'll go with the Chiefs in the early game and the Ravens in the late game. Hey there, Austin. Glad to have you here. But today, my main topic is, why did people expect different results? And I've talked about that probably going back to last year when they first announced the playoffs was going to 12 teams. I said, it's dumb, it's stupid. Because first of all, I'm great, Austin. Thank you for asking. You're watering down the regular season. But second of all, more important than that, since the playoffs started, almost every year you have two, maybe three good teams, and that's it. And if you look at every year the playoffs up until this year, 2014 through last year, almost every year the first round playoff games are blowouts. So if you can't find enough good teams to have first round playoff games be good and a 14 playoff, why go to a 12-team playoff when it's going to be the same results? And sure enough, it was the same results. Now, people are acting like this is the first time it's ever happened. Like, oh my gosh, we never see blowouts in the playoffs. That's not true. If you have not seen this stat, I wanted to share this with you. But from 2014 up through last year with the 14 playoffs, the average margin of victory in the first round has been 18.6 points. This year in the first round, it was 19.3. So it's not even a point per game difference. So up until this year, all the first round games were blowouts. And this year, the first round games were blowouts. But I don't know why people expected differently, because if you're going to have blowouts in a 14 playoff, you're going to have blowouts in a 12-team playoff when the better team is hosting home games. That should tell you you're going to have blowouts. But now, of course, people act like Indiana didn't deserve to be there and SMU didn't deserve to be there, but yet Tennessee gets blowed out and probably looked the worst out of all the teams this weekend, and nobody talks about that because they're in the big bad SEC. And no, Austin, that is not Christmas lights. That's just decorations in our house. I usually use a studio, and I have my own studio, which is where I normally am, where you see all the Clemson stuff in the background behind me. But that room is not insulated at all, good or bad. So in the summertime when it's really, really hot, that room is really, 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 really hot. And in the wintertime when it's really cold, that room is really, 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 really cold. So I decided from now on, when that room is really, 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 really hot or really, really cold, I'll just come in the living room where we have insulation and sit either in an air condition or a heater and do these videos, because in the summertime, a lot of times I'm doing this, and it's because I'm sweating all the time. So I decided from now on, when it's really hot or really cold, I'll just do it in the living room, and that's why the background looks different. But Tennessee looked the worst of all the teams this weekend, and nobody talks about it because they're in the big bad SEC. Now, I predicted Ohio State to win that game, and it had nothing to do with the fact that Ohio State plays in the Big Ten and nothing about UT playing in the SEC. It's because, to me, Ohio State is the better team, and Ohio State proved they're the better team. Now, I thought the game would be a lot closer than that, but I think it's pretty blatantly obvious that Ohio State is the better team. Josh, I'm going to talk about that as the game gets closer, but I really haven't decided, because this is not one of those years where Notre Dame is just being hyped because they're Notre Dame. This year, Notre Dame is actually really, really, really good, and Georgia only had one or two games this year where they actually looked like a great team the whole game. Almost every single game, like the Alabama game, for example, the first quarter they looked like absolute dog doo doo. In the Florida game, for about half that game, they looked like dog doo doo. Against Kentucky, they played like dog doo doo. So if you tell me that Georgia's going to come out looking like they looked for basically half the game against Florida or the whole game against Kentucky, then I'll say Notre Dame wins the game. But if you tell me we're going to get the Georgia team that we got when they played Texas, then I'll pick Georgia. So I really haven't decided yet. Thank God the game is still 9 days away, so I've got time to sit and think about it. And I'll probably make a prediction when I talk about the playoff games, either late this week or early next week. But as of right now, I'm not sure. I know I heard a couple of hours ago that right now Georgia's a 2-point favorite, which tells you that people are expecting a really, really, really tight game. And in a game that tight where the team that's favored is favored by 2 points, it's going to come down to two or three key plays, one way or the other. And whichever team makes those two or three plays will be the team that wins the game. Austin, I used to watch all sports. Honestly, before I got married and had kids, I didn't know that TV existed outside of sports. I watched racing, I watched lacrosse, I watched field hockey, I watched volleyball. If it was a sport, I even watched cherry spitting one time on TV. I watched track and field. If it was a sport and it came on TV, I watched it. But when you get married and have kids, you can't dedicate that much TV time to sports all the time. So you have to kind of decide which ones are the most important and which ones you want to watch and kind of watch them and forget about the rest of them. But there was a time in high school and shortly after high school before I decided to think about getting married that all I thought about was sports. And if you mentioned a TV show to me that wasn't sports related or a sport, my response was always, "What is that? I've never heard of it," because I did not watch anything on TV outside of sports. And if it was the middle of the night and I was up and no sport was on TV, I turned the radio on and listened to sports talk. It was sports all the time. I started watching wrestling when I was 6 years old, Austin. I've shared this story before, but I've kind of slowed way down on my wrestling viewership as well because I've got 6-year-old twin boys, and all they think about is wrestling day and night, night and day. And if I'm watching wrestling and they walk by and see it, they immediately start wrestling. And then with 6-year-old boys, once they start, there ain't no stopping them. So I don't even turn the TV on half the time wrestling if they're home because I know they're going to either hear it or they're going to see it. So if it's not late at night, if they're not here, I don't watch wrestling. But when I was 6 years old, me and my sister and my mother lived with my grandparents, my mother's parents. And every Saturday morning, my mother and my grandmother and my sister would all go shopping. And there was a video store about 10 minutes from the house we lived in back then that you could rent wrestling, back then, VHSs. And me and my papa would go up there every Saturday about 9 o'clock in the morning and rent 3 or 4 wrestling VHS tapes and go home and watch wrestling from like 10 o'clock that morning till about 9 o'clock that night. So it was 10, 11, 12 hours of wrestling every Saturday. That started when I was 6. So by the time I was 8, I was pretty much hooked on wrestling and watched it all the time. But just like sports, I've had to cut way back on that now because of my family, but I still watch it when I can. I still enjoy it, but now I'm reading about it more than I am actually watching it because when you got 6-year-old twin boys, if they see it and they start wrestling, they ain't stopping. You're going to spend the rest of your night until bedtime trying to calm them boys down, and I'd just rather them not start. So if they're here and up, I don't even turn it on. But people forget about 2014, which was the year the playoffs started. Oregon destroyed Florida State. It was the very first ever playoff game. Oregon won that game 59-20. And then one year in the playoffs, Clemson beat Ohio State, I think, 31-0. One year, I think Notre Dame destroyed Clemson in the playoffs. One year, Alabama beat Michigan State by almost 30 points, if not more. I think just last year, Michigan beat first round. They beat, I think, Washington by 20-something points. One year in the national championship game, Clemson beat Alabama by 28 points. So it's not like up until this year, every single playoff game's been close. That ain't so. But I saw an interesting stat late last night, and it was funny, but it got me to thinking, that's why people that hate the SEC hate the SEC. Now, granted, I can say this because I don't believe in any conference. I've always said since I was 10 years old, I'm a Clemson fan. I don't care what conference they're ever in, I'll be a Clemson fan. And right now, if every other team in the ACC could lose every game they play, I wouldn't care. I'm not an ACC fan. I'm a Clemson fan. I don't have ACC flags in my house. I have Clemson flags in my house. In 2014 or 15, 13, whenever it was, when Florida State won their last national championship, when I drive to Clemson, they don't have no banner at their stadium that says national champions because Florida State won it. It didn't do Clemson a hill of beans of good for Florida State to win that national championship. And I have watched North Dakota State, Josh. I've watched North Dakota State, and I've watched Montana State, and I've watched South Dakota State. South Dakota State has a really good quarterback and an exceptional head coach. But I've also watched Furman, and I've watched Wofford, and I watched Georgia Southern back in the day when they were in the FCS, which back in the day was called Division I AA before they moved up. So I've watched quite a few teams in the FCS level. And Austin, if you like old wrestling, you better watch it while you can, because once Raw moves over to its new network next month, all the old wrestling footage is going away. So you better watch it while you can. But the stats said that the SEC was, I want to say, 1,264-0 in hypothetical matchups. So in other words, they've never lost. And the only reason it got brought up was because Paul Feinbaum, who I've said many times, anybody that watches Paul Feinbaum, you're out of your mind. That man is an absolute buffoon. But he's supposed to be entertaining, and he is if you like stupidity. But if you watch him and actually believe what he says, then you're an idiot. But Paul Feinbaum wanted to take shots at Indiana and Clemson and SMU for saying they don't belong in the playoffs, but yet he went to school at Tennessee, and they looked the worst of anybody all weekend, and there was no mention at all of Tennessee. And that's what I'm talking about, Austin. It's not going to be on Peacock. It's going away next month. You better watch it while you can, because in a couple of weeks, it's gone. But that's why the stat came out. And Kevron, I agree with you. Paul Feinbaum is a clown. He's only on TV to be entertaining, but too many people actually hear what he says and believe what he says, even though it's been proven time and time again that Paul Feinbaum is just there for your entertainment reasons only, and that's it. But people actually put stock into what he says. Paul Feinbaum said this. Automatically, if Paul Feinbaum said it, it ain't so. But there are 1,264-0 in hypothetical matchups, because here's what they do. Now, I'll use a good example. I talked to a guy last week named Chad that I work with, and Chad came to me and asked me, do you think Clemson beats Texas? And I said, nope, Clemson can't score enough points. I don't see it. And, of course, unfortunately, I was right. He said, I'm pulling for Clemson because I hate the SEC. I'm a Georgia fan, and I hate the rest of the conference. And I said, well, Chad, I'm glad you feel that way, because you're one of few that feel that way. But here's what most SEC fans will do. Take, for example, Ohio State and Tennessee Saturday night. most people tell you, well, I hope Ohio State wins because I hate Tennessee. I can't stand Tennessee. I despise Tennessee. To make you think they actually want the Buckeyes to win. And then when Tennessee wins, they'll say, oh, can't beat the SEC. The SEC's best there is, best conference out there. Well, wait a minute. You were saying you wanted Ohio State to win because you hate Tennessee. And now Tennessee wins, and they win because they're in a better conference. It's kind of like what they do in the regular season. And Kevron, I agree with you. That's why I hate conference talk, because you have too many people that want to talk about one conference being better than the other. But at the end of the day, it doesn't matter. If you're good, you'll win. If you're not good, you lose. And that's just a fact. But I like to poke fun of the SEC because, in my opinion, it stands for sorry excuse for a conference, but yet they act like they're so high and mighty and their crap don't stink. And when they win, you never hear the end of it. When they lose, they don't want to talk about it. Just like Tennessee getting blown off the field Saturday, they won't talk about. But SMU getting blowed out, they'll talk about. Indiana getting blowed out, they'll talk about. Tennessee gets blowed out, we don't want to talk about it. But they don't mention the fact that Kentucky sucks, and Auburn sucks, and Mississippi State sucks, and Arkansas is average at best, and Vanderbilt is average at best. But they make like, if you're in that conference, you've got a tough schedule. So when playoffs come around and their teams win, they'll say, we won that game because we're battle tested. We had that tough schedule during the season, and we're battle tested. But then they get to the playoffs and they lose, and they'll say, well, when you play the kind of schedule we do during the year, it's going to come back and hurt you, and it come back to hurt us. So when you win, you're battle tested, and when you lose, you lost because your schedule's tough. When Ohio State wins, you hate Tennessee, but when Tennessee wins, it's because they're in the SEC. So when you have arguments like that, you never lose, because no matter what the outcome is, it's because the SEC. And you can't do that. All them people that do crap like that should be lawyers, because you never could lose an argument, because you find something to say, and no matter what happens, you're right. You never lose. When your team loses, you hate them. And when they win, oh, they're in the SEC. And that is absolutely 100% buffoonery. But people actually believe that stuff. And Kevron, I'm with you. I hate the SEC, but I hate every conference. There ain't no conference I like, because I'm not a conference fan. I'm a team fan. But I never have figured out why college football fans are that way. When Major League Baseball is going on, people don't talk about, well, I like the American League West. No, you like the Angels, or you like the Rangers, or whoever your team is. You don't say, well, I like the National League West. No, you're a Dodgers fan, or you're a Padres fan. I like the National League East. No, you're a Braves fan. And it's the same way in the NFL. People don't sit back in the NFL and say, well, I'm a fan of the NFC South. No, you might like a team that's in the NFC South, but you don't like that conference. But for some reason in college football, people try to lag on to a conference, and it's never made any sense to me. And I've watched college football for 30 years almost. At 10 years old, didn't get it, and now 30 years later, I still don't get it. What are my thoughts on Rickey Henderson? Josh, Rickey Henderson is the greatest leadoff hitter of all time. And just like the NBA has done away with centers for the most part, because the way the game's played now, Major League Baseball has done away with center fielders, not center fielders, but leadoff hitters in the form of your prototypical leadoff hitter. So there'll never be another Rickey Henderson, because you look at the Dodgers with Shohei Ohtani, he was their leadoff hitter, and they played better when he was the leadoff hitter. But a guy that hits 50-plus home runs is not a leadoff hitter. And you look at the Braves, when Acuna Jr. is healthy, he's their leadoff hitter. And a guy that hits 40-plus home runs is not a leadoff hitter. So the game has changed to the point to where we're no longer going to see your typical leadoff hitter whose job is to get on base any way possible, whether that's hit by pitch, a bunt, a walk, whatever. Now the game is turned into leadoff hitters can be 40-plus home run guys. So there'll never be another leadoff hitter that even compares close to Rickey Henderson. And Austin, the reason why it's going away is because Raw's moving to Netflix. And Netflix is a separate owned company from Peacock. So Netflix and Peacock are competitors. So Netflix doesn't want old wrestling on a competition's network. So they're making it go away. So that's why it's going away. They want to make sure if you watch old wrestling, you're watching it on Netflix and not on Peacock, because they are competitors, and you don't want your competitors to be getting the views that you think you could be getting. So that's why it's going away as soon as Raw jumps to Netflix next month. So it makes sense when you think about it, but I hate it because if you don't have Netflix, now you got to pay extra money per month to watch it. So I hate it, but it makes sense. So any thoughts on any of this, please feel free to let me know. I did 2 videos yesterday talking about all the bowl games this week, but I stopped at Friday because there's a whole slew of bowl games on Saturday. So we'll talk about those coming up later on in the week, but I did the bowl games. That was today, tomorrow. There's none on Wednesday and Thursday and Friday. But let's go ahead and get our dad joke of the day in here. Little is known about the 10th reindeer. You know, Olive the other reindeer. And that does it for today's Ref Brandon and the Todd Family YouTube video. Until next time, it's Ref Brandon saying, just like in pro wrestling, life can be over by the count of 3. Tell your friends and family how much you love them.